Okay, looks like we are operational. Let us get our light bulb and gizmo steampunk land going today on the 15th of September in our ongoing year of doom, 2025. Welcome to Evolution Hour with the website blah blah blah, blee blee blee, but all the little miscellaneous things that I have a tendency to point out on our show. Anyhow, here we are with the last episode that I'll be having before I go for a trip to Seattle. So you'll have a different background on here for the next couple of weeks, and then we'll be back in ye old den, probably maybe in 2 weeks, maybe the week after that. We will see. It's all up in the air. All depends on how circumstances run it anyway. The weather gods going over the Seattle Pass and all that. At the moment, the weather looks halfway decent. So as you all are aware who are following the show, I am going through to perform a task where I am working through the references in this creationist book, Titans, by Jonathan Sarfati and Joel Tay, that does not, in fact, have a reference bibliography. So that anybody coming into it trying to find out what exactly are they citing, what aren't they? Yes, they've got footnotes at the end of the chapter, but you can't tell right off the bat what sources they're drawing on, and therefore you can't tell easily what sources they are missing because they don't have a reference bibliography that you could consult. So effectively, I'm compiling that and running through source by source to find out whether or not they are representing the material reasonably, where they're not text stacking, avoiding data or whatever, or not. And as it happens, Sarfati and Tay have earned a really high count for misrepresenting their technical papers. They're currently running at like 68%, which is way higher than Nathaniel Jensen and others, who are often sparser on references. John Sanford's really sparse in his genetic entropy book. But here they've got a few hundred sources, but a relatively small proportion of those are technical papers. And of those, as we've been seeing, a big chunk of them are misrepresented source material. So here we got a little bit about the creationists at this stage. They've been talking about the soft tissue stuff, and now they're kind of throwing a little bit of jabs at radiometric dating, and basically it's trotting out the golden oldies. So a lot of material from the creationists' own bits, and when they finally do get to some technical papers, boy, there's nothing new in this. It's ridiculously antiquated. They bring up the idea that there's been the carbon-14 that have been found in coal, and therefore implying the coal isn't really old. And for that, they cite two papers. Fortunately, we will be able to put links up, so you'll be able to follow up on it. Both from 1986. Just absolutely ridiculously far back dates that are so far removed from things that it's just nonsensical, as though nothing was passed since then. These were initial stabs at trying to figure out some things about cataloging radiocarbon material. What's the limitations? What sort of details do you need to deal with in terms of contamination? And the one paper, the Boykins paper, it definitely is aware of possible contamination. And it's interesting that Sarfati and Tay did not include Garfinkel, who is in the Boykins group, from a paper very next year, 1987, that did follow up on that whole contamination issue. That one, unfortunately, I only just have the abstract, but I'll be putting that up. So a tactical omission indeed, because that paper is alluded to, the Garfinkel, in some creationist literature. So there are people that are aware of it, but they're not including it here. So trying to trawl all of this stuff out, yes, you could find indications that there were potential carbon readings that were indicating 60,000 years old. That's out at the limit of the ability of carbon-14 to deal with. And so you're talking about trace issues, contamination issues, stuff, because it's possible for carbon-13 to be misread as carbon-14. There's a whole bunch of sidebar issues on there. So for Sarfati and Tay to be dangling these very old papers as if nothing has happened in almost 40 years is an indication of their misrepresenting the source. Chalk more what? To misrepresenting source. And I'll be putting a link up as well to post that Kathleen Hunt, who has done that magnificent thing years before, around that same period, in fact, on the reptile-mammal transition. She was going into creationist claims, different ones, about carbon-14 and coal. That's a Talk Origins post. And so I'll be putting a link up to that. So if you want to follow up on that, you can look in that as well. Now, our part 2 is a fun little thing from Zach Hancock. And he had a chat, a biologist, with a friendly but just intensely intransigent creationist, Rebecca, a few weeks ago. And that was on YouTube. It went on for a couple hours. And I'll be putting a link up to that, where Zach was trying to explain evolution to her, trying to answer her questions about it. And in fact, Dan Stern Cardinale recently did a commentary piece on Rebecca about how when she has guests on who try to present information that she doesn't like in her ideologies, she kind of hopscotches around to other things. And there's this, I've noticed that there's kind of this deer in the headlight, sappy, silent smile, as you can just imagine the information that she doesn't want to notice bouncing off of her head. And then she'd move to a trope. Well, what can you do to show us evidence of evolution? Without ever really pinning down, and in fact, this is partly the guest's fault, not Zach Hancock's case, of what exactly would you accept as evidence of things. Anyway, in this discussion that Zach was having with her, it became clear that along the way, she was channeling some of the anti-evolutionism of Cornelius Hunter over in the intelligent design camp. Now, Rebecca is a young Earth creationist, pretty much. And so it's interesting how tactical she was in dealing with that aspect of things, which I find really interesting indeed. The real fun part then comes with finding out what exactly they were talking about, because this whole Cornelius Hunter bit arose because of an allusion that Zach made to a new paper that Eugene Koonin has contributed to, which happens to be open access at PNA. So I'll be putting a link on that. The paper itself, the lead author is Sahayakan et al. And it's in silico evolution of globular protein folds from random sequences. And Zach was clearly impressed with this as an indication of the ability to model evolutionary development at a very deep protein formation level, about the degree to which randomness and random connecting of things, this would apply more, frankly, in very early evolutionary history than later when things have got channelized into working off of existing biological systems, that could end up producing functional forms. And there's indications of potential functionality in forms that nature hasn't quite got around to getting to, but can still arise from natural sequences. Koonin and their bunch have been exploring these issues for decades and have a huge mass of technical literature on there. He's one of the most prolific theorists in this era. At any rate, clearly Rebecca was thinking that this paper was not terribly impressive, and I'm pretty sure she was riffing off of Hunter's little video that he did responding to this Koonin paper. And it's like 6 or 7 minutes long. It's not exactly a spectacular thing. And I'll be putting that up. And because you'll have the original paper to look at and Hunter's brief little squibs that they're sneaking design in, and it's not really dealing with like the origin of life parts, and that it's so it's therefore not suitable. Hunter never quite gets around in any of his decades of writing to explain what the hell he's talking about on stuff. Hunter has been one who has sort of revived or attempted to revive a thermodynamic criticism of evolution. He hates the idea of convergent evolution and gripes about that. It's kind of an interesting thing about how increasingly irrelevant I find him in my analytical studies is that just about the last post up until this new video from Hunter dated back all the way to like 2018. So he's not exactly a live wire. He just repeats material over and over again. But he's obviously terribly impressive for dear Rebecca. We'll see whether Dan Stern Cardinale or Zach Hancock himself eventually discover this thing and decide to do a more detailed analysis of the Sahayakan paper. Hey, I would recommend you do that, frankly, because it's a fascinating paper. And Zach in particular, because he was the one that was impressed by it at the level, so he would be in a perfect position to be able to describe. If you're listening, I recommend that would be a future bit to go down. And it's the Hunter thing is a really short video. There's no source citations that are alluded to. It's just basically a philosophical diatribe that's kind of like, I'm not convinced attitude to what Casey Luskin and that crowd would be doing. I think his posting, Hunter's thing is like that Darwin's God. He has got his own little website that he kinds of does stuff to. And so although he pops up occasionally still at Evolution News, he's not quite as prolific as he used to be in years past, although people who follow him perhaps more than I have been paying attention to. Remember, 2018 was my last citation. If I'm misunderstanding Hunter's position as a kind of pimple on the back ass of modern intelligent design, let me know. So anyway, we will be traversing to the great Seattle next week, and we will be spending time there. I will still be coordinating. We'll be another episode of our Luskin show. But remember, I won't be able to put the links to the material on until I get back to Spokane. So that'll be like on a whole thing. So let me put, let's see, about 12 minutes in. I don't see anybody in the live stream, so it may be a cool night. I'll fill in a little bit of a sidebar for Dapper Dino because he is one of those who, when we were all together a couple of years back on our Grand Canyon adventure, Colton and quite a few others were together on that, and we would while away our evenings playing a variety of games, which include my Politique war game, at least the early iterations of it, and some minor modifications and improvements were suggested, and I had been thinking about them, and that's been a few years. Well, some circumstances have changed. And a local friend here who I've been helping with one of his projects, he happens to have a 3D printer. And so suddenly Politique has jumped into a new dynamic of not only updating the game card structure to take into account the adjustments that were being suggested by Dapper and others down there when they were playtesting, but the new structure of how to put the game board together. And so I'll just show a little show and tell of, there we go. Pay no attention to the details of the colors because these are just the kind of little test things that I was printing out. And you can see some of these things. My printer is getting panics mode. But the major point is this is a 3D printed plastic grid with little ridges around the edge so that when you put armies down in the hexes, they won't clatter. This was a test element, all originally done in black. And so all the colors you're seeing are just printed things on Avery label paper, so I can stick them down to see in terms. We were judging font size and color balances and stuff to kind of see what kind of material will be going. In the finished product, we'll be using color materials so that the board, all of the stuff that you see as black lines will disappear. All of that will be the color of the C hexes and the other hexes. And the point about having this, and this is a portion of the board because there will be 7 modules, of which this is one. This is the center module. And they will plug together or nest together. But it also means that they can be rotated and restructured in any combination so that if you don't want to play on the standard board, as laid out in the main rules, you can shuffle the pieces around and end up with millions of different combinations that separate countries and change the way the sea balances are organized and all of that. So it's going to be a really funky little material. And we are also planning on 3D printing, well, not only the little game pieces, the armies and corps and little ship things and such, but also the whole box that everything is going to go in. So it's going to be like a series of nested bento boxes that will stack together so that when you unpack everything, the little money will be in little troughs, and the game cards, their boxes will all be equally constructed. So any discard units will be available for there, and then they'll have easy storage of the other components down in the bottom and a nice little lid on the top. And it'll be I think about yay big-ish. 5-6 inches or so tall, and a thing not much bigger than that board, which is a little over 10 inches side to side. And so it's going to be an hexagonal box to boot. We can be very innovative. So we don't have to go through the rigmarole of buying a kind of off-the-shelf box approach, which a lot of these games have gone with. And so because they're 3D printed, we can have dimensionality. In fact, the current version, as we were testing out these different components, this version here is flat on the bottom, but the later iterations, my friend has put in grid formats that the panel just stack on top of each other and nest, so they'll form a nice, neat sandwich inside the game boxes. So it's going to be really fun. And once we get all of our color material organized and our font sizes and what we want to have printed, how we want the colors of, I was just showing the point values of the hexes in black, and we may or may not use that format. We might use a different thing. We'll have to do some testing to find out how all that works. So anyway, that's a little side project that we're dealing with, in addition to working on the tail end of the cosmology chapter for Rocks for Their Volume 2. I have wrangled a local professor of astronomy astrophysics who hopefully will be able to do a technical vetting on the chapter. Once I get that finished, I'll be emailing him the components, and he hopefully will see that it's a legitimate enterprise and will give me proper feedback on that. He'll probably be doing that over the holiday season, so I can expect to get that input back by early next year, as we are moving on to working on the final major chapters. I still got to input all my material on the whale evolution and paleocontinent issues. That's going to be figuring in one of the chapters that Jackson already has his part done, and I've got to get all that material done in. But this cosmology chapter was occupying a great deal of my brain pan. So it was kind of nice to have veer off into some relaxation sidebars when I'm not working on that with the politique game. So a lot of little projects going on. I see no one in the live stream, so apparently everybody is occupied on a thing. We had a slight cooling trend here in Spokane, so we had actually a little bit of rain shower, so I didn't have to worry about watering the lawn today. We're supposed to be kind of warming back up into the 80s or so by the end of the week, but hopefully not as broiling as it was over the last couple of weeks. So go that as we may. Hello, Maya. Oh, finally caught a stream again. Yes, yeah. I come on at various times, depending. Sometimes when a bunch of stuff is going on here locally, or I've been mowing the lawn, and that I can be bumped over to the point where I'm coming on like at 12:30 or so. But this I was able to get going a little bit earlier on it. It's a fun thing is I can veer into a slight discussion of the politics of the current world. Of course, the recent murder of Charlie Kirk is all in the news, and the issue of who wants to blame whom and who wants to avoid blame. And as usual, our narcissist in chief, Trump, is just trying to blame the communist liberal Democrats as if there aren't other issues and things going on here. The degree to which the nation can keep getting too snotty and nasty, even though we are awash with weaponry, even though there are also extreme ideologues on varying sides who want to escalate things and start a civil war. No, we've been through that. It's not good. We want to avoid that. And then I and others are holding our belts in because I am contending this is 1929 economically, and we are going to be seeing a very bumpy road by the end of the year and into the next few years as the Trump administration flails around trying to resolve these problems that they have made and are absolutely incapable of resolving. That's a sad circumstance, but there we are. And so we get to see, it'll be interesting to see like Marketplace. For those who don't listen to Marketplace on NPR, please do so. I'll put a little blurb onto it as well. Marketplace, Kai Ryssdal, the show has been going on for like a zillion years on PBS, NPR. And so I think Kai is like the third or fourth host on it, and you can get it free on their website, NPR, and that it's easy that you can stream it and whatever. But anyway, he is continuing that long tradition of really in-depth and accurate discussion of matters economic. And if there's any troubles that are ensuing, and there are plenty of them brewing about the long-term impact of these idiotic tariffs and how it's affecting local businesses, how it's affecting supply chains. There's a lot of things. A little weird sidebar is that it's been pointed out that one of the kind of bellwether canary in the coal mine phenomenon has been Las Vegas, which when things are starting to turn really bad in the economy, Las Vegas kind of drops in business. Guess where business has dropped really seriously? I've started to see a lot of commercials for come to Las Vegas because it's so fun, because it's practically like a ghost town down there. To some extent, they priced themselves out of a lot of markets by how expensive everything is down there. But also there's potential harbinger of impending doom economically. A sidebar measure would be how attendance has been dropping apparently really seriously at the Disney parks in Florida, although its rival, the brand new Universal Epic Adventure, seems to be doing pretty darn well when the torrential rains are not closing the place down because most of the rides are outdoors. And I've seen Florida during a rainstorm, but boy, one shot of just a couple of weeks ago with somebody who was going through the adventures there, the rain was absolutely horrifically bad. It drenched him so bad he had to buy new clothes in the shops, new T-shirts and pants and stuff to dry himself off before he could continue the tour of the park. So should have a park that's a little more weatherproof. Yes, very expensive. Yeah. And so there reaches a point, even in times when people still have a lot of discretionary income to play. But if we're 1929 and we slide into 1930, whoa. Remember, the modern Las Vegas has all come about post-World War II. So the mob-dominated Las Vegas of the 1950s and 60s and 70s, and then the cleaning up act era when Howard Hughes and others were buying into the place in the 70s and 80s and 90s, the development of the hyper mega casino structures from the MGM Grand to Bellagio and all the rest that's in the early 2000s on. All of that's been in times that at worst has recessions to bump through, but not catastrophic depression level. So it's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic will be working out. Plus, there's way more competition from Indian casinos, of which there are a plethora, quite a few in my state of Washington, but I think most there are native tribes all over the nation, and most have taken advantage of the casino frame. So the old days in the heyday of the new Las Vegas, when they were pretty much the monopoly of serious gambling, with Atlantic City as their only major rival on the East Coast. And remember, Atlantic City was where Donald Trump attempted to get into the casino business himself and managed to bankrupt gambling casinos, which takes a pretty bad businessman to pull off. He has a hotel, the Trump Tower Hotel in Las Vegas, but it doesn't have a gambling license, so there's no gambling there. It's not actually open to the general public, so just if you wanted to go inside and look around, you can't. unless you're staying at the hotel. So any restaurants and facilities that are there are simply catering to whatever limo nabobs apparently feel the need to stay in Donald Trump gold-plated thing. I imagine the ballroom probably looks like the thing he's planning on building for the next to the White House. And judging from the vomit of gold filigree that has occurred in the little interview room there in the White House, I'm not holding much on taste. So let me put up my little bit from our patrons who have been sticking with me all of this time for good or ill. I am much appreciated of it, and especially if we start getting into serious bad economic times. As much as I love to have the Patreon help, if any of you are in a situation where you've got financial concerns as to whether or not you can still pump some money my way, take care on that first. Dapper Dino makes exactly the same thing. Of course, he's generating most of his living now from the various shows that he does on YouTube, whereas most of my income still is Social Security plus a little dribble of the book the royalties. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, buy the books. And that helps me that way as well. And then the Patreon angle as a little sidebar, which it makes a big difference in the squeaky by from one month to the next budget situation. So I am totally appreciative of everybody that has kept helping up and down and in and out all through our matter. Yeah, Marketplace is really a stunning. It's objective, it's detailed, it's concise. They constantly keep track of local businesses of a variety of demographics, from mom and pop places up to people that are larger employers, and the international implications of things. And it's always been fair and careful and explaining stuff to be honest. And if it turns out that the Trump administration attempts to mangle the data and twist it to fit their agenda, you can rest assured Marketplace will be pointing that out. Or they will find independent sources of information to be able to measure the circumstances of things. So it's a handy guide. I think you can hear it on Sirius XM. It's on the NPR feed on there. So if you have that listening in the car or on that venue, plus again, it's on the NPR website, so you can stream it directly that way. So it's in this world in which you've got so many mega buck billionaires owning up media forms, video and otherwise. It's nice that we still have a public broadcasting system that is not beholden to the diktats of the God King emperors or their plutarch or oligarch plutocrats. And they will be voices to listen to, just as Midas Touch and a lot of these others on YouTube that kind of pay attention from things from their angle, give fresh insights on things that will dive into these things at a deeper level than what you're getting in the now playing pussyfoot thing. CBS, apparently, the new regime there, and since they've made their cave-in deal with Trump, they will be toning down stuff and turning into like a mini, vague, squishy Fox Light. Doesn't sound like a good thing. So pay attention to, it's a good thing to measure what pops up on some channels and some on others. If you see some exodus from some of the legacy media, they're going into different modalities. That will be another indicator that that medium is been compromised and is no longer pay attention to clear, unadulterated facts. Clearly, if you have a huge proportion of the population that is listening to Foxtrot Pravda or Newsmax or Steve Bannon's propaganda network, Real America Now, and all of that, they're getting a completely fantasy land puff piece echo chamber that is like Tortugan Bad Method Central. One bad method to rule them all. So let me put up my little advert for our rocks for there. We have managed to get in about a half an hour, which is not too bad. And again, I'll be sticking the links to almost all of them. Will have direct links. Only that one paper I'll only be able to put the abstract on. Come on, here we go. It is an interesting world that we have where at least there's the possibility for the moment. We live in societies where we can do these things, that if you have an independent voice, you can still present material. Many totalitarian countries try to restrict media access. They try to limit access to or dissemination of information. There is full out fear and trembling for a democratic system when that's happening. And the only way to show that that level of information control is dangerous and bad is to outcompete them and leave them in the dust heap of history. There, if you want some waxing philosophical, there it is. As I do an over narration to The Rocks Were There, the splendid book that Jackson Weed and I have developed, Volume 1, and Volume 2 will be just as pithy and just as detailed. In fact, probably hopefully I'll be able to get by without having to edit and tighten the text or change font elements. But we'll see that when I get the total page count out of the way. The first book was literally pushing up the boundaries of what they can print. So that acts as a benchmark superstructure. And there's been such a fabulous amount of new technical material that's come along in the 4 or 5 years since we did the previous book that, and a lot of dumb creationism in the meantime, plus the advent of Trump 2.0, that is upsetting material that will certainly provide grist for the future book that we'll be doing on all the anti-vaxxers and all of that, assuming that the civilization has not collapsed completely in the meantime. But first order of business is to get Rocks Were There Volume 2 out of the way. So everybody, if you're in places where there's flooding or fires or dangers or people dropping bombs or potentially rampaging nutballs with weapons of other forms, stay careful, stay safe. Keep being curious, keep looking into things, keep fact checking. That's the only way we can combat this. That a republic where too large of a proportion of it's like the equivalent of the vaccine level. You have to have a certain level of vaccination to be able to combat the natural proclivities of the virus. So you have to get like 70, 80, 90% vaccination rates. Otherwise, it won't really work. Well, I believe and suspect there is kind of a counterpart to that in the level of tortucanosity in a culture where if you have way too many proportion of the people who are dogma-driven people who are completely sincere in believing things that they have drawn on from secondary pundits and echo chambers and never have fact-checked, and indeed may even lack the skill set to be able to fact-check, then you get people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump in political power. And that it looks like various nations are able to kind of pull back from that a little. We've seen South Korea with their recent coup attempt. We've seen the conviction of Bolsonaro, whether or not idiot Trump will be trying to raise terror. He already put tariffs in on Brazil, with which we have a trade surplus, solely not because of any trade issue, but because they convicted Bolsonaro of committing treason in his attempt to perform a coup. And so Trump is attempting to punish the people, the nation of Brazil, for holding their snotty Trump-light Bolsonaro to account in the way we, alas, did not do Donald Trump. So lessons of history, well, kids, we are living it out. Everybody stay safe. Keep an eye out for the wooden penguins. They are always on the march. And we will see you next week, presumably from the Space Needle City of Seattle, and there for the next couple of weeks until I'm back home after birthday times. So everybody stay safe, and we will see you all next week. Ending